Alright, so part 2. The first ride alone after nearly a week of not being able to. I got up the next morning and I just slapped that license plate on that ass and I go to start the bike, but it won't start. Shit. Oh wait, the choke. I knew that. So I cranked that air-cooled single overhead cam, 2 valve per cylinder, 234cc parallel twin to life, and I just let it run. And I'm just standing there like, wow, everything really came together so nice. And I'm just waiting, until my engine reaches optimal temperature because I didn't start it in a while. And then I give it this beastly amount of gas, trying to show off to my brother. And a cloud of brown smoke shoots from the dual pipes. Like you know how the shitty cars in GTA 4 would just go. And that scared the shit out of me because I thought right then and there that I bought a lemon or I just fried a piston ring. Fried piston rings. The actual ride itself was naturally a bit tense, so I had to stop several times on the side of the road, just to catch my bearings and let cars pass because it's really one of those things that make you feel more free than you have any business being. And I don't want to sound cliche about it, but that's just kind of how it feels when you first start out. And look, the Rebel 250 is not a fast bike, it's not a dramatic bike, but it's decently peppy, because it's so lightweight. And they do have a nice little pull that kind of levels out when you rev it high, because those bikes actually rev pretty damn high. I think they hit almost 9,000, which is pretty high for a fucking single cam. So I rode all around my neighborhood, basically just trying to get used to everything before it was time to head to work, where I would have to set out on Atlantic Avenue. The road where I would hit speeds of at least 30 miles per hour. I know, gasp, right? At one point, I actually nearly dropped the bike and I had to walk it for a sec before I psyched myself up again. So I jumped back on the bike and I rode home because work was 4 in the afternoon that day. After a quick nap on the couch, it was time to head back out for work. So I geared up, I got the bike ready, and I headed out. It's funny to recall back on this because even with the shakedown ride earlier on in the day, I was still too scared to ride via Atlantic Avenue, which was the only reasonable route to my job, mind you. So I take this dumbass route through Brownsville. I gotta stop and check Google Maps and shit. I'm half confused because I'm in places that I can't connect to each other. And at this point, it's pretty fucking clear that I'm definitely gonna be late to work. So I found my way back to Atlantic Avenue and I have to go backwards for 3 blocks, just to cross over to the westbound side. It was there that I got my first ever biker wave. It was a guy on a KLR, I believe. So I bust that U-turn and I just used Atlantic Avenue like a reasonable human being. I tried to catch up to the KLR, just so I could stick with him, but he was fucking gone. I wasn't catching up to that guy. But when I made the U-turn on Atlantic Avenue, I actually saw this chick with long flowing hair on a Gixxer, and she also gave me the biker wave, and that, just added to my confidence. This ain't so bad. So I finally make it to Fort Greene, where it starts to rain just a little bit. Park my bike right in front of Habana Outpost because it's always lit over there. It's never really desolate. So, if anybody tries to steal a bike, it's gonna be within the view of a bunch of fucking people. I know that there's always a Ducati Monster parked right in front of the joint, along with a couple Vespas around it. So I knew that it would be a decent legal place to park without, thinking about it, looking at the signs and shit. I just wanted to park the bike and then just go to work because I was already late. And sidebar, actually, I played no games back then with security for my bike. I locked that bitch up with a U-lock in the spokes because this is before I even had a disc lock. I had a nylon cover locked to the frame with a master lock. You know how you could lock the cover to the bottom of the bike. I had a fake cable lock and a chain that bounded the fork to the frame, to the turn position, which was extra fucking dorky because the Rebel actually had a built-in fork lock. The thing is, it was the old style where it wasn't in the ignition, it's on the side of the fork, so you had to look for it, but I didn't see it. So on my lunch breaks, I deadass kept coming back to Habana just to check on the bike, ultimately taking comfort in the fact that any bike thief would obviously go for the owner's Ducati Monster S4R right next to it over my shitty 80s beginner bike. And when I walked into Target, everyone was just dapping me up oh shit, you actually got the bike, bro, damn. Anyway, I got off work at midnight, the rain was finished, threw on my headphones, and I just took a calm ass ride home via Atlantic Avenue with no traffic because it was so late. And I was really starting to get used to all this shit. Now that was in September 2015, so in that month I basically jumped straight into the deep end with maintenance and just learning the mechanics of the bike. It was just the bike is running a little bit hot, well, let me change the oil. Do a little oil change. And the oil changes on that bike were so cheap. 1.5 quarts of 1040, no filter, just the Buy the fucking cheapest shit you can find, you know, $7. And the great thing was that, like, when you did one oil change, you always had half a quart left, since it was a quart and a half, so you buy 2 bottles. So the next time, all you have to do was buy 1 quart. Like, I would do like bi-monthly oil changes, you know, within like the first 2 months, just because it was so easy. And like, I was just getting practice of doing it. You know, like, oh, the bike is stalling when the choke is all the way off. Well, let me just yank the carb off and the airbox off and just get up in there. You know, just took the carb apart, put it back together. like that's a weird noise I'm hearing. How about we just do a valve job just to make sure everything's okay? And that was a scary one because like I did the valve job one day and I actually just made it worse. Like I started the bike and the shit just sounded like a typewriter. And you know, I'm like cranking the engine over by hand. I'm watching the timing marks. I'm putting the pistons at top dead center, bottom dead center. I'm measuring the clearances and then I start the bike and it's just I remember I turned off the bike and I just went inside and just went to sleep. But when I woke up like 2 hours later, I went back out and I nailed the job. Got some sleep because, you know, like when you're out there in the heat, it's just like, oh, fuck, I just want to be done. So I was like, you know, rushing through it. But then I took my time when I came back out, finished the valve job, and the bike ran better than it did before. Now fast forward to early November 2015, and that's when I had my first crash. Yep, it was on Atlantic Avenue and it was in the rain. I was basically poised to be late for work, so I had to ride in the rain at a decent speed to get there on time. As I was approaching a stoplight with the traffic, I had switched lanes, but I basically applied way too much front brake, which caused it to lock up, sending me sliding and tumbling down the street. Got up, picked the bike up, walked the bike over to the side of the road, called out of work, and then I basically just, you know, sat there and assessed the damage. Scratches, missing turn signal, missing mirror, huge tank dent, bent bars, the front fender was warped and it was rubbing the front tire, and then the fork stop that keeps the forks from turning too far, that had broke off, but the bike still functioned fine and it still got me home with a push start. It was a very somber experience, as you can imagine, you know. I just bought the bike in fucking September and I threw it down almost 2 months later, and somehow my mom didn't strangle me from hearing that I crashed. But she did tell me that I couldn't ride the bike in that condition. So I filed a claim with Progressive, and he told me that he could send an adjuster out the following week to come take a look at the bike. But over the phone, he actually admitted that with the value and the age of the bike, that they would most likely just total out the bike and give me a check. And upon hearing that, it had me kind of conflicted, you know, like that isn't how I want this to go. The bike was by no means a total loss, and it could still be ridden with a little bit of work, and the engine still ran like a top. I wasn't ready to just sign away my first bike like a pile of scrap. So he gave me time to think it over and just decide what I wanted to do, and in the end, I basically just canceled the claim. So with that said, I'm still sitting here with a fucked up bike that I can't ride, and I'm back to square one, you know, taking the train wherever I gotta go just 2 months later. It's unfortunate, but I pretty much vowed to fix that bike even if I had to pay for it myself and gain the expertise to do it. Just a week later of taking the train, I started getting that itch to ride, man. Now remember, my mother told me that I couldn't ride the bike with all the damage that was done to it. But what does she know? She doesn't ride bikes. I was off on one day, so I snuck out and just took the bike for a ride. The front fender was still rubbing and I couldn't bend it back into place, so I just had to take it off. During the ride, I noticed that the horn had broke too, so I had no signals and no horn, plus I still had that super quiet stock exhaust, which isn't exactly safe at all, so you could barely see the bike because it's so tiny, and now you could barely hear it because, well, I don't have a horn and the bike runs like a sewing machine. Eventually, after basically just disobeying my mother, she came around and calmed down, and I started to ride my Rebel with the damage done to it. Very shortly after that happened, I decided that it was time to buy the base model GoPro Hero camera and just mount it to my helmet because I felt like I should have had that crash on film. That same week, I also bought that signature white Scorpion helmet that I rock, which is sort of now starting to reach its deathbed 3 years later, and I'm gonna be replacing that thing soon. So yes, I started to ride around with the GoPro on my head, shooting black box just in case. A crash will definitely humble you, but the GoPro quickly went from an insurance tool to me realizing that I want to share my fun with others digitally. So on paper, I started my channel on January 24th, 2016. The reason why I say on paper is because I was thinking about it for some time, but I didn't have great video gear to do it, nor did I have video software, but I wanted to secure a name for my channel. So 4 months later is when I chopped my stock mufflers off and installed a pair of MGO shorties, and I couldn't really find a good video that gave an idea of how they sounded. After installing them, it completely changed the attitude of the bike, and I loved it. So back in March 7th of 2016, I had to share it with the world in the form of my first ever video on the Illustrated channel, which I'm pretty sure is still public. April 2nd, 2016 is the day I posted my very first true motovlog, and from then on I started to vlog a lot more and post a shit ton of Rebel 250 videos to help build a collection of videos on a bike that wasn't quite there on YouTube. And so started my venture into the whole motovlogger scene. I started to upload vlogs, instructional videos, incidents, and there are a few videos that are private just because they're so cringy. But what is still there, you can go back and take a look. My logo went through a few stages, and initially it was just a picture of my helmet with the GoPro on the side. It was this picture right here. And then this was my logo for a while, which is actually a real picture of my helmet similar to this one, but it has gone through various effects in Photoshop to give it a less real appearance. And I also used to have a big sticker bomb on my old Rebel that I put together myself. So I found another one online and incorporated it into the logo, basically just shaping it into the face shield of the helmet. But I recently made this one where the idea is that the sticker bomb is sort of leaking out the helmet onto my body. I wanted to create a sense of recognition at a glance, you know, like I wanted people to know whose video it is simply by seeing like certain colors and the borders in the thumbnail and the avatar, you know, brand recognition. And above all, it just creates a sense of cohesion that looks nice and consistent. If you want to know more about my video process and my philosophy when it comes to motovlogging and all that stuff, you know, editing, watch this video. I feel like a lot of people skipped over it because it sounds boring on paper, but it's very much a good watch if I would say so myself. Anyway, it's now June 2016, and 234 cc's was just no longer enough juice for me. You know, I needed an upgrade. But to get a new bike, I would have to sell the Rebel, not only for the money, but because I just don't have space for 2 bikes. So how would I sell this damaged and modded old bike? Well, I would have to make it presentable and quickly. So I started to make all of my restorations and repairs over the course of a few weeks. I'll list all of the restorations I made, and then I'll give a slideshow of all the photos that I took and actually used in the Craigslist ad. The Rebel was basically in the best condition it ever was while I had it at this point. And it was all by my hand, so you know, suddenly it became harder to give it up, but I managed to post it up for sale anyway. So a guy comes along, and he's actually a DEA agent, a Fed. So he takes a look at the bike and he's like, you know, can I test ride it even though I don't have the cash on me? And I'm just like, I don't know, man, I need collateral. Like, I know you're a cop, but it's just business. What about your car? So I basically got a fucking Fed to hand over the keys to his late model Volkswagen Golf just in case he decided to skip town on my rinky-dink Rebel. So he takes it for a spin and he likes the bike, and he tells me that he literally only wants the bike because he failed the MSF course and he wants to practice for the retest. He said he only wanted his bike license just so he could buy a Polaris Slingshot, which is registered as a motorcycle in the United States for whatever reason. So he gives me about $1,000 for the Rebel. I canceled the last 2 months of my insurance, and I was starting off my search for a new bike with just over $1,200. So I spent like maybe 2 weeks looking for a 600 class sport bike, preferably from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, you know, for the price, the simplicity, and just the less likelihood of it getting stolen. I looked at bikes like the CBR 600 F2, CBR 600 F3, first gen Yamaha R6, which unfortunately, like most Yamaha sport bikes from the late 90s, had second gears made out of chocolate. I looked at the Nighthawk 750 and my all-time favorite 600, the Ninja 636 from 2003 to 2004. I also looked for naked SV 650s, but one night I found this great deal on a 1999 Yamaha YZF 600R. Let me tell you, I played 0 games with this posting. I got back to the guy within an hour of it going live. I told him I would be by tomorrow morning. The issue with that? Well, he lived in the Bronx, which is an issue unto itself, but I also live on the far side of Brooklyn. Somehow, some way, I convinced my dad to drive me out to the Bronx on a work day for him. And we didn't have time to rent a U-Haul, so I just grabbed my old plate that was once on a Rebel, and I headed out. The YZF was posted for $1,800, which I didn't actually have, so I would have to make him an offer he can't refuse. So, we reached the spot. It's an auto garage, and we see 3 guys and 2 kids standing around the bike. We greet the guy, and I start inspecting the bike, and it was in a decent condition. It wasn't the best. A little bit of rust here and there, and it was this moldy off-white color, and for some reason it had this design that kind of looked like the Honda wings, which is kind of weird on a Yamaha. The tachometer just kept jumping around for some reason, but holy shit, the horn actually worked. The bike checked out visually, and it also started right up. The owner revved the bike, and that 2 Bros exhaust just like sang a song that spoke to my soul. But still, I'm trying to buy the bike, so I can't show him how much I want it. So instead, me and my dad just kept pointing out flaws to just have cards to negotiate. You know, like real tire kicker asshole shit, you know, like, oh, yes, you're missing a bolt here. Oh, that's concerning. So I hop on the bike, and immediately the first piece of trouble I have is that I cannot for the life of me adjust to the foot peg location. I'm trying to, but I'm just not used to rear sets. Also, the bike is way taller and way heavier than the Rebel, so I'm just looking like a fish out of water. When I finally managed to pull off, I only went about 75 feet. But the way she pulled, only in first gear, just put a huge smile on my face. And the thing is, like, this thing had more pull below 4,000 RPM than the Rebel had at like 9,000 RPM. So I offered a guy 1,600 instead of 1,800, and he takes a 16 right then and there, like no negotiation. So I insure the bike, I slapped the plate on it, and now I have to ride dirty back to Brooklyn and pray I don't get pulled over. While I rode the highway, I just short shifted and stayed in 5th gear below 5,000 RPM the entire time. And when I finally got home, I showered and got ready for work, and I was like, well, time to take the train because this plate is not for this bike. So I'm like, peace out to my pops, and he's like, oh, you're not taking a bike? You're pussing out? Bet. So so that day I ended up riding dirty through the streets of Mexico. I felt like such a cool guy on that 600. The bike, which wasn't in stellar condition to begin with, began to fall into disrepair and affectionately became known as the Beater. No matter how shitty it got, it still took me from point A to point B. A huge chunk of my YouTube library takes place on this bike and represents a time where I started to go hard for this YouTube stuff. Eventually the motor had begun to kill itself, what with the failing second gear and the misfires. I basically deemed that the work was going to be more money than the bike was worth because problems would just develop again elsewhere on top of what was already problematic. So I bought my SV1000, which is so recent that I don't even really have to get into that again. I had owned both bikes at the same time, and due to a lack of space, I had to keep the YZF on the street as opposed to the secure spot that I keep my main bikes in. The plan was to sell a YZF for parts, so I would rotate the bikes out. Like, I would take the SV out when I'm going to work, for example, and then just put the YZF in a secure spot while me and the SV were gone. Because the bike still ran and it could be moved. It just ran like shit. Then when I get home, the YZF just goes back on the street. And it lasted 3 weeks doing nights on the street side, but then someone stole it. I actually made a video about it where I go into depth of like what I did. What happened to the bike? I still have no idea. But I guess one man's trash is the next man's treasure. I think that's about it for my origin story. Like I said, the SV1000 era is recent enough, you know, to just go back a few months and just look at everything. So yeah, that's how I got into motorcycles. MSF cores, 250, 600, and then 2-liter bikes. You also know my motivation for starting my channel too. And I'm gonna leave these links to separate videos that kind of just expound on certain things that I've mentioned in this video. So yeah, thank you for all your support throughout the years, and I'm hoping you'll stick around for a few more. You just watched The Illustrator. Peace.